So today I've got in another ZE0, easily identifiable by the rectangular top to the motor stack. This one's a 2012. It's got 7 bars still showing, but only 60% state of health and an HX of 37. So it's not coping well. What we're doing with this one is we're going to put in all the cells that I recently removed from a really nice env200 that was having a 40 kilowatt hour upgrade. So I took out all the cells because in use they're cooled when they get over 20 degrees centigrade during charging. So yeah, they're really nice cells. It's going to make an interesting comparison once I've reset the BMS on this after changing all the cells to see how many bars we get back and what sort of usable range a car's going to have, especially in winter. So step 1, you can see I'm ready to disconnect the negative terminal on the battery. I've got my battery terminal spray here ready for when I've finished, because I always spray the terminals and also just check all the levels and stuff while I'm here. So screen wash I've already done. I'll do the coolant and brake fluid and stuff when I'm boxing the car up ready to go back to the customer. So the 12-volt negative terminal is disconnected. Next job is on these earlier ones just to lift up the flap, take out the 3 bolts that hold this protective cover on, and the main battery cutout is underneath there. So I will just do that quickly and then I'll be back with you. Obviously, being a ZE0, it's got this older style of battery shut-off, which is much rarely seen these days, but still nice and easy just to lift up and remove. Much bigger and clunkier than the later ones, which are pretty much universal across all the other batteries after they changed to the ZE0. But anyway, that's now safe, so it's time to go underneath. So now that it's up in the air, the next job is to remove 1, 2, 3 plastic under trays. They're all held in with some of these plastic clips and with some 10mm headed bolts. Start at the front because they overlap. They all have arrows on them to show which way they go back onto the car afterwards. So what I do find on some of these early cars is that these outer bolts can get a bit rusty. So before I do anything else, I'm going to put some rust remover onto them so that hopefully when I come to take them out, they all come out cleanly and nothing snaps. So this is good timing. The ZE0 with the tired battery that I'm going to swap the cells on has just come in this afternoon, and right this second I've just started to do the strength test on the very last of the 96 cells. It takes about 3 weeks to do the whole lot because they're 3 hours each, and obviously I'm not getting up 3 hours at a time during the night to swap them over to the next one. So quite a lengthy job, but this one, because it's come out of an env200 and because they're the new chemistry cells, they're amazing. Every single one is between 46 and 48 amp hours, which is pretty spectacular. So it's going to be good once it's fitted into the car. So 2 of the 10mm head bolts that hold the plastic under tray on failed. Not a problem, I can drill and tap those out, and to be honest, only 2 failing after, what have we got, 14 years? That's not too bad. But obviously the main mounting bolts have been in there for 14 years as well, but there's some small holes that you can spray the rust dissolver up through. I use Rust Off because it's absolutely amazing. So yeah, 3 bolts each side. These 2 tend not to get rusty because they're properly covered by the plastic panels, but again, there's holes in the chassis rails that can be used to spray the rust off through. So just going to disconnect the high voltage and the CAN connections, and then we're ready to start thinking about taking out the main battery bolts. I like to use a nice long power bar to crack the bolts off before I put the battery support underneath, and then they all come out nice and easily with the buzz gun. These ones, as I say, I've already put rust stuff on. I've cracked them off. I'm actually going to let this one sit overnight because they're quite tight. Give the rust stuff a chance to work. It's getting late today anyway, so I've got the high voltage and CAN connectors disconnected. I've just got to take off the zinc plate earth straps, and then tomorrow I can put the battery support in on my trailer here, and then zip out the 8 bolts that hold it to the chassis and the 2 holding the bracket at the back, and then it's ready to drop down, take the lid off. Because this is a ZE0, it's one of the nice lids with the rubber seal all the way around, but again I'll probably find that the bolts holding the lid on have rusted a bit, so I suspect there's going to be more liberal use of the rust off tomorrow, and then we'll get the lid off, start to take out the old cells and swap them for the replacement ones. So the car's now resting on my hydraulic trailer that I've made to make this job nice and easy. So all I've got to do is just pop underneath now with the buzz gun, take out the retaining bolts, and then we can lift the car up off the battery. So there we go, the car's now lifted up and away from the battery. So all I've got to do, now that I've taken out the security stop on the lift, is let the battery down. And there we have it. This is the reason I've got 2 pallets on the trolley, because it then leaves the battery at a nice comfortable working height. So away we go. We're pretty much ready to go. Just got to whip the bolts out all the way around. But as ever, I'm going to give them a quick spray with rust off, and I'm going to blow off some of this gravel too, just so that the working area is a bit less untidy. So I've used my trusty rotary wire brush to go over the tops of the worst of the rusty nuts. The back half of the battery pack's got a fair amount of rust on the surface as well, so I've scraped off everything that's loose. I'll put some rust stopper and some protective spray over this before it goes back in the car. But yeah, cleaned up all the nuts and bolts. One of the under tray ones that failed yesterday is poking up through here, so I'm going to try and draw it out upwards. So it's got a bit of rust stuff on for the moment, but yeah, gonna give it another quick blow off and then sort out this rust, and then we'll pull the top off. An interesting thing is there's a lot more bolts in these earlier ZE0s than there are in the AZE0 onward packs. A lot more bolts, basically a couple of 13s, one this side, one to match the other side, and then all the rest are 10s. A couple of 13s here at the back too. So we'll get all the rust so that it's not so ugly, and then we'll whip the bolts out once the rust off has had a chance to do its job. The other very obvious difference on these compared to the later battery packs is the use of these security Torx bolts to hold down the clamping plate. So it's a Torx bit like this, S2T30, with the hole inside it to go over the security pin. So as always, I've put a bit of rust stuff on these to try and make taking them out a bit easier. But yeah, on the later batteries, they're all just 10mm bolts, which makes it much more simple. I've got the cover just placed back on at the moment, so I don't get any rust flakes or rust off or anything going down inside the connections. I'll pull that out of the way before I do any proper work involving the actual battery, but just going to press on with the protective work for the moment. The other technical difference between the battery packs, these early ZE0 ones just have a serial number in them here. The later packs from the AZE0 onwards all have a date code etched into them there, so that you can tell when they were built. They all have stickers with part number and serial number on as well. So yeah, that pretty much covers all of the differences between the different generations of battery casing. Many of these earlier Leafs have a bit of an issue with surface rust hidden up above where the battery goes here. So what I do while I'm in here, put some stone chip spray onto it, hopefully give it at least another 12-14 years worth of life. Before and after. So here's the inside of the battery. It's very similar in layout to the later 30 kilowatt hour ones, but obviously all the modules are single rather than double. there's oddities which are different. So the bracketry on the back is slightly different here. Yeah, just a few little minor oddities. The biggest difference is the reusable seal that the ZE0 came with. But if you look on my YouTube channel for seal, there's a reusable seal that I suggest for people that are working on their later batteries to save having to glue the lid back down and then unglue it if necessary afterwards, if anything else needs doing. So yeah, first thing is to disconnect the main power leads at the corners and the bus bars so we can get the voltage down to a sensible level. We'll then probably take out the center units here, so we've got plenty of room to work. Once the center units are out, it can actually save having to take the side module assemblies out, because with these out of the way, it's possible to get the bus bar wiring off, and then you can just undo the cells and hoik them out in situ. But I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Most of the ones that I've stripped down recently have all been for fitting in different Chinese type cells, so the whole lot has to come out anyway. But we'll have a look and see what the best solution is, and then I'll make my suggestions from there. So I've taken off the two main power leads of this back batch, which effectively halves the voltages inside. It makes it much safer. Next task is to remove the BMS, which I've whipped out simply. Each plug has a little press tag on it, and when you press that down, the cables all pull out. They're all coded, so they only go back one way, so there's nothing to worry about marking or anything. So we'll put this to one side, and then we'll press on with getting this rear bank out. So the clips that hold all the cables in have got these kind of squeeze points on them. If you're careful, they're a little bit fiddly. What I like to use is just a pair of long nose pliers, and then I can get in behind the bracket, squeeze on the back of the clip, and then pull all the clips out without breaking any of them, which means they can all go back in afterwards. So I've got all the cables detached from this rear bank. We're going to pull this one out first and swap the cells in this one first of all, and then we'll come back and focus on the two sets of front banks. So we've got a series of bolts. There's 3 13mm each side, then a series of 10mm across the back and the front. Can't reach far enough to show you the 3 13mm the other side, but yeah, very, very standard. So we'll get all those pulled out, and then we can think about lifting the pack up. So you can see I've handwritten numbers onto various of these cells. The ones across the top here show me the cell numbers that the temperature sensors go back into afterwards. The ones down the back here show me the cell numbers that have the bolts and therefore the brackets going onto the mounting at the back. And then at the front, it's the same. I've done a series of numbers so that I can make sure the brackets are all in the right positions when we go to put the other pack back together again. And I've photographed all of those in sequence so I can refer back to them if the old brain memory starts to let me down a bit. Okay, so now that all the bolts are taken out, it's just a case of lifting the module assembly out of the battery pack. I use my workshop engine crane and a nice strong chain, so I can literally just lift it out. Then I can actually motor the trailer out from underneath it, and then I can drop this down onto my I actually use a pallet to put these onto when I'm working on them, because it's wooden and it's nicely insulated and nice and level. Gives me a bit of height as well, so that I'm not scrabbling around on the floor. So yeah, gonna lift it out, get the trailer out of the way, and then we'll crack on with swapping the modules over. So there we go, rear module assembly, lifted up clear, ready to pull the battery out of the way. Then I'll drop it down and get stripping. What I do like to do with these before I let them down is to take off this back reinforcing brace from all the way across, which means that I can then roll the module assembly onto its back for taking off the bus bars, etc., while they're facing upwards, and then it's easy to take the ends off. Rebuilding it, I tend to stand the whole assembly up from the floor and build it vertically so that the weight of the cells lines themselves up nicely, but I'll show you that in a minute. First off, I'm just going to get that back bracket off. So there we go, battery pack is down and it's rolled onto its back. It's at a decent working height when I've got a stool in front of me. First thing is to get these brackets off, then we can take off the protective covers on the bus bars and go on from there. So you can see how I've written the module number that I wrote onto the top of the modules earlier. I've written it onto each bracket. Again, I've written it at the top, and then it saves any trying to remember which way up they go when it comes to time to rebuild it, just in case there's any hold-ups on the way, and then there's no forgetting any of the obvious data. Bus bar covers just clip on, so once you've got these back or bottom two clips pulled out, it's possible just to twist and encourage the whole thing to just come off. All three are the same, but I still like to line everything up the way it comes off, and then I know it's going back. So now we just got to get the bolts out of all the bus bars out of the modules and the screws down the middle. The beauty with this layout is that everything goes back exactly where it comes from on the next set of cells. So away we go. So there we go, that's all the bolts and all the screws taken off from this bus bar connection, and these are just clipped onto the cells, so it unclips and comes off in one easy go. And there we go, we have a bank of cells ready to be undone and swapped over. So we're ready to undo the bolts that hold the whole pack together. You can see this end, they have a lot more thread showing than this end, because these nuts are actually locked onto the bars that go right through. So we'll take them off this end. Quick word of warning though, once the fourth one is out, the whole lot can roll off the edge onto the floor, damage themselves and all sorts. So what I do is I take only 3 out. I can then rotate this end plate out of the way and put one just bar back through without the end plates in the way. And then when I take the fourth one off, they're not all going to fall over, and I can do the reverse when I build them up, and I'll show you that in a minute. I'll get them all lined up behind these ones so that I can put a bar through all 24 of them to start with, and then one corner of the retaining plate to start with, and then swing it down into place once that's got its bolt on. It'll be a lot more obvious when I show you in a bit, but yeah, just a word of warning, because I've seen it happen before on other videos where people take these apart and then the end ones drop off and cause all sorts of damage. Not good. So hopefully that makes my ramblings a bit clearer. You can see how both of the end plates are just swung up out of the way. I've got 3 of the bars on the deck here, so what I'm going to do is put one of the bars through all 24 modules behind it, so I can make sure that the layout of modules and brackets and everything is exactly as needed, and then that will save them from falling on the floor or anything nasty, and we can start to rebuild this back module. So you can see here the sequence of modules. They're plus, then minus, then plus, then minus, then plus, etc. On the later double modules, you can't get them the wrong way around, but with these it's easy. So you have to be very careful when you're lining them up to be going the opposite. So looking at the top, because it's easier to see, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus. Exactly the same as this, starting at minus and then working through. Now these newer cells have more brackets on them than we actually need. So for instance here, I've got a position where there's 2 lots of brackets, but the extra lot aren't going to get in the way. So I'll just carry on doing this till we've got it all lined up, and then show you putting the end plates back on and so on. So the difficulty with building these horizontally rather than vertically, which is the way I've always done it in the past, but I thought I'd try it this way to show you as well. Once the cells are released, you can see that the standard bar isn't long enough. So what I've done is I've put an M8 threaded rod through, which I can pull down just enough to get the nut on the bottom one. Then I can swap the M8 to this side, do the same there, get the nut on the bottom one, and then once the nuts are running, I'll actually do top on this side so they're opposites. I'll show you what I mean in a minute, but once the nuts are on the retaining plates, then it's going to be easy to do them up. I have found, as I had forgotten, that the original end plate has this spacer built into it because the cells are slightly different. Obviously I've got loads of end plates kicking around, so I've swapped this for a later end plate which doesn't have the spacer in. Everything else is an exact match, so it should go together nicely. So there we go. The rear set of modules are all in. You can see it's got the markings on from where I stress tested them all. You can see the markings are opposite to each other because the cells have had to go in plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, etc. The bus bar plastic is lined up, but I'm just going to pop it off quickly just to double check the plus minus locations before I commit to putting all the bolts and screws back in. So there we go. I don't need to show you step by step because it really is the reverse of removal. But anyway, the rear bank is in, all bolted down. Obviously I'm not going to do any of the wiring until I'm finished. But yeah, all bolted down. I've tested for voltage and we've got a good 170, 180 volts. I forget exactly, but I'll do the same on these two side ones, which will be half what the rear one is. So I'm expecting about 90 a side here. So yeah, that's going to do for today because it's getting a tad cold and wet here, although clearly inside I'm not wet, which is useful when there's electricity, but hey. So going to call it a day for today, and then I'll pick the videos back up tomorrow. Hopefully get the front two done tomorrow, and then we're ready to test it, box it up, refit it. So with the general election finally out of the way, we can resume on this on a Monday morning. First thing we've got to do is get the crossbar brace out, because this goes across the mounting plate that these side batteries go on. There's more temperature sensors here, obviously, which I'll have to take out anyway, and it's the same process at the back, whereby there's a little clip with plastic tags you can pull back. We need to make sure the wiring's going to come out too, but the temptation is to just take the temperature sensor out of the cell, and then the crossbar can come off with the temperature sensor wiring. There's a couple of other bits of wiring which will get in the way, which we'll have to just peel back gently, but they don't cause any kind of issue. And then once we've got the crossbar out, there's an assortment of 13mm bolts that hold each assembly down into the battery bank. We're going to lift the whole assembly out in one go. And the important thing with these is to also support them in the middle here when you lift, because otherwise they can start to bend this bottom bracket. But I'll show you what I do with some well-placed chains and my trusty engine crane in a few minutes, once I've got all the ancillaries out of the way and got the bolts undone. So the crossbar's held in with two 16mm nuts. There's one each end. They're usually done up quite tight, so I use a power bar to free them off before spinning them out with the air ratchet. And then there's four 13mm bolts holding the middle of it down to the casing. We need to get this out for numerous reasons. You can see that one of the bus bars each side goes underneath it and so on, but yeah, it's just in the way. So the wiring looms, I've given myself enough room hopefully to just draw this out without having to disconnect too much. Just got to finish pulling this one off, undo the four 13mm, and then we're ready to pull the crossbar out too. So here we are, lifting this side bank up at an angle helps to make sure it slides out neatly from underneath the relay box here. The relay box is loose anyway, but it just makes life easier. And you have to account for the fact that this end is heavier than that end, so the lifting point isn't central, but it just comes up and out nice and easily. Gonna pop it down on my, I'm actually using an old barrel with a cloth on top as a support, and I can do this at a decent working level. So here we are, ready to go. We only need a couple of tools, 10mm socket for doing both the bolts on the plus and minus on the battery here, and the Phillips screw for doing the BMS signal wires in the middle. 10mm bolts for here. First thing obviously is to take off the covers for the bus bar wiring, and then once that's off we can get all the bolts and the screws out, unclip the bus bar assemblies as we did on the rear section, and then we're ready just to buzz the retaining bolts out, swap the modules over, bolt it all back together, put the bus bars back into place, and then refit it into the battery pack. Makes it sound easy, practice makes perfect, but yeah, take it steady, no problems. Okay, so all the bolts and screws are out from the BMS bars, and as with the rear section, these are literally just clipped onto these little clips on the cells. So gentle tug, and that's off. We're now ready to undo these. We have to do these rear sections as a batch and these front sections as a batch because the reinforcing plate is joined in the middle. But yeah, 8 bolts for each section and we're ready to swap. It's important at this stage to make a note of the polarity of the cells. Basically all of the bottom layer have the plus on the left, but what I like to do is just put a little red dab of paint onto the hold down board just to make sure there's no forgetting. So with my paint pen as my permanent reminder, I've marked the 4 positive positions. Because the cells always alternate their polarity layout, from here on it's very straightforward. I only change 1 stack at a time to save it from overbalancing, because quite predictably, if I was to take both of these off, the weight of these has the potential to tip the whole lot back off there. And while I'm just fiddling with the rest, I put 1 securing bolt back in position just for the moment, just while I deal with this next stack, and then we can get it bolted down and repeat the procedure the other end. Again, just double checking the layout of all the modules, plus minus, all good. So there we go, that's the 8 modules at the rear changed. Now time to undo the retaining bolts and do exactly the same job here. Again, only 1 stack at a time to make sure there's no massive imbalance. Now I can't remember if I pointed this out earlier, but because these earlier type cells have this lip all the way around them, they all have these spaces between them all the way through. It was the same on the rear bank, but I think I might have forgotten to point that out. The newer type of cells are designed differently, and they have all of the spacers and stoppers built in so that the ones that come out can go to find other purposes, because they're not needed for separating the modules. They separate themselves when they go back in, and all is well. So there we go, that's all the modules changed on this right hand side bank. One last check to make sure the pluses and minuses are all in the right place and all laid out properly. So yeah, we're now ready to put the bus bar assemblies back on with their covers, and then we can drop the whole assembly back into the casing and do an exact mirror image repeat of the left hand side. So when you go to refit the bus bars, obviously the distance between the left and right sets of cells is relatively fixed by the length in the bus bar, and you can see there's some left to right movement on the modules. Only the bottom ones are basically in a solid position because they have little ferrules that are fixed to the base. So what I like to do is just leave all of the retaining bolts slightly loose, just so that there's a bit of movement on the modules, and then I can get the bus bar assembly clipped on to make sure they're all the right distance apart, and then tighten everything up before bolting on the bus bar assembly. I use a little plastic lever if I need to spread them out at all. Plastic, obviously, because there's bolts in there. But yeah, when they're loose, you can wiggle them by hand anyway. So just make sure everything's lined up beautifully, and then there's no issues later on. So there, as you can see, all of the bus bar mountings are all clipped in place. I've actually loosely put nuts into each one just to absolutely guarantee that it's all gone back together well. There's a little bit of flexibility on the sizing, but not enough that you could get away with some misalignment. And if you give them a wiggle now, you'll see that the movement that we saw before is almost completely eliminated. So we know that those are in perfect position. So now time to do up the main securing bolts. Then we can fit the rest of the bus bar bolts and the screws, and then we're ready for a refit. And then just before we commit to putting the bus bar covers back on, just checking the voltage. We've got 85 volts on here, 84, 85 volts. We had the best part of 170 on the back there, so that's well within standards. So yeah, ready to put the covers back on, and we can move on to the other side. So here's the left hand bank taken out of the battery casing now. I've turned it around this way just because I'm right-handed, I don't know why. Anyway, I've reversed it through 180 degrees because it's just a preference, but it's exactly the same job as the other side, just a mirror image. So we're going to start by taking off the covers, then we'll take out all the bolts and screws, then we'll take off the bus bars themselves with their holder, and we can get all the modules swapped over, get everything lined back up and bolted down, and then refit it later on. So the same as with the other side, the cell layout is positive on the left on the bottom row all the way across, but again I've marked it just because I can. So here we go, swap the cells over and then ready to rebuild. And again, now that we've got the bus bars all bolted on with the bolts and all the screws done up tight, just checking the voltage, 84.7 to 84.8, that's absolutely spot on. So ready to put the cover on and remount this pack, this batch into the battery pack. So that's got all three banks of modules renewed for the newer type from this env200. They're all really good, all around 46, 47, 48 amp hours. So next thing is just to rebuild it in exactly the reverse of dismantling. So we're going to put this missing crossbar back in first and re-plug in all the wiring that goes to it. Then I'll just refeed all the rest of the wires, bolt back down the relay box, the main cut-off assembly, pop all the rest of the wires on, and then we'll test it with Leaf Spy just to make sure that we're seeing everything that we're expecting to see before we put the lid back on. So now I've got everything bolted in. I've got all the high tension and the low voltage wires all secured. I've got the cutoff back in position temporarily because I want to just test the battery and make sure all is well. I use the excellent OBD2 kit from EVs Enhanced. This comes with two different adapters, one for the earlier batteries, and then there's a different shaped one to fit the different pin layout on the later batteries. But either way, it's just plug and play. So I can put this in, I just have to put 12 volts in here, and then I can attach Leaf Spy to the OBD connector, and then we can just read that all is well. Saying no data because when we're in settings, when it's just a battery, we need to change the settings here in Leaf Spy to be for just a battery. Now that we've done that, it connects straight in, and we're showing an average of 3.537 volts, which is exactly what we're expecting. A nice even cell balance for cells that have been individually tested and charged. So yeah, the BMS still hasn't been reset, so it's actually still showing us the old state of health and the old HX, but the volts in the battery are correct. So yeah, all is well. We're getting a nice even set of figures off it. So what we're going to do is box this up, get it back in the car. So now on a nice sunny morning, the battery is rebuilt, put back together and ready to go back into the car. It's up on my lift. All I've got to do now is drop the car down onto it. I have a plumb line that I use to hang from the rear mounting up here, and the plumb line comes down so that I can just make sure that we've got the battery in the right position, which makes dropping the car onto it very straightforward. Once the battery's in, obviously just reconnect it, and I'll make sure the charging and everything works. On these early ones I can reset the BMS very easily, so I shall do that and then take it for a test drive, make sure there's nothing unusual. Not expecting anything unusual, but it's always worth just making sure that all is exactly as anticipated. This one, as with most Leafs, I suspect the diff oil has never been changed, so I'm going to do that while it's up in the air as well, and then customer gets back a car with the rust proofing that I've done, new diff oil, as well as a revitalized battery. So it's all done. The car's charging as we speak. If you listen carefully, you can probably hear the hum of the water pumps. Battery's all refitted, connections are all redone, everything's working, all the bolts are done up, so it's just time to refit the plastic under trays, and then we're good to give this back to the customer after resetting the BMS.